secularism is unlivable. It does not work. And why would it work? It ends up in nihilism.
Hey, can we connect with a culture when the gospel is met with antagonism or apathy? Yes. Talk about it with Collin Hansen on Steve Brown, etc.
He's an old white guy, an author, broadcaster, and seminary professor who's sick of religion. And he's brought friends. Please welcome Steve Brown, etc.
Hey, we're so glad you're here. You always have a place at our table, and we trust that we always have a place at yours. It's a gift when you give us your time, and it's a gift from us when we give you our time. We're going to try and not waste it. We've got a great guest. In case you're wondering, I'm Steve, the aforementioned old white guy. Matthew Porter is our executive producer. He's not in the studio. He's on Zoom with us because he has a sick kid at home. As I've said before, if he loved Jesus, he'd be here. But he's not, and we'll just deal. And he makes sense. He's been phoning in for years.
Just because it's true doesn't mean you have to say it.
It's emailing it in.
Yeah. Yeah. And our producer, Jeremy, is in the little glass booth. Jeremy says that I am basso profundo. I'm pretty sure that's Latin for handsome and talented, but I'm not sure.
It's Latin for a full head of hair.
Let's see. That's profound B, and then there's an S.
I get no respect. Our one-man IT department, John Myers, is in the tech bunker, and he keeps our computers computing and our YouTubes YouTubing, and our stations stationing. Dr. George Bingham is the president of Key Life. In this wonderful season of thanks, George, thanks you for keeping Key Life in mind in your year-end giving. And Kathy Wyatt is, of course, the soft feminine side of the program. Kathy says there should be a fall Olympics, competitive leaf raking, cross-country apple picking, and 500 meter hay rides. You ever been on a hay ride?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I love those.
I could do without the leaf raking.
A little itchy.
We could leave that off the list.
We got a great program for you today. Collin Hansen serves as Vice President for Content and Editor-in-Chief of the Gospel Coalition, as well as Executive Director of the Keller Center for Cultural Apologetics. He holds the Gospelbound podcast and has written and contributed to a pile of books. Timothy Keller, his spiritual and intellectual formation. Collin's latest book, which I hold in my nicotine-stained fingers, is The Gospel After Christendom, an introduction to cultural apologetics. Collin, thanks so much for spending this time with us. You know,
I'm really glad to be here. I've done this show before, but it's been quite a while. So
well,
glad to finally be back.
Well, we're pleased you would come back. Some won't. We ought to start from scratch. I know what classical apologetics is. I know what presuppositional apologetics is. What in the world is cultural apologetics? And beyond that, what in the world is apologetics?
Well, apologetics is a term that has fallen out of considerable favor. It sounds like we just feel bad about Christianity or something like that, like we're apologizing. Not many people recognize its classical origins of simply defending the faith. or making a kind of just making an articulation, just defending the faith, making a case for why we believe, why we trust Christ, why we trust the scriptures, why we trust our theological beliefs and how they're better than the alternatives. That's basically apologetics. And I mean, you're right to pick up on the presuppositional approach, because that does actually factor into cultural apologetics. But I think this is the easiest way to think about it. When you're dealing with apologetics, you're often handling questions of truth. Did this happen or did this not happen? When you're talking about science, you're talking about the physical resurrection of Jesus Christ, things like that. Well, that's just one of the dimensions, though, of how people will decide whether or not they come to faith. You also have things like goodness. You have things like beauty that come up. And so these days, a lot of people are not actually quite as interested in truth as we wish they would be. They might even go so far as to say something like, oh, that's fine. You can believe that. That's fine. That's your truth. Okay, well, now all of a sudden you have a real big problem there. But the real questions come down to, well, why would I believe in Christ? Does this actually, is there something good about this? And in fact, part of the defense we have to offer is that a lot of people do not think that Christianity is good or that Christ brought good into the world. And then finally, there's the question of beauty. Does this make the world a better, more beautiful place? Would it make my life more beautiful? And once again, a lot of the arguments for many years have been, no, Christianity makes the world an uglier place. Christ came and made or at least his followers make the world an uglier place. So in cultural apologetics, we are often using a lot of those presuppositional approaches. We're trying to help people to interrogate their own beliefs, to consider that all of us are believers, not just those of us who profess faith in Christ, but all of us put our faith in something. But in cultural apologetics, we're trying to apply that specifically to things like, what is the basis for justice in this world? How can we actually live together in peace? And showing that Christ is the only way we can do that. Insofar as our culture moves away from that, no wonder we see the kinds of divisions and confusions that are endemic today.
Things have really changed, haven't they? I mean, we're living, I'm an old guy, so I've watched it change, and I'm dizzy from spinning. I mean, it really has changed, and what you do when you engage in cultural apologetics becomes increasingly important.
Yeah, I teach a course in cultural apologetics, and it's very different in a seminary context to teaching cultural apologetics compared to a lot of other things, because every year I'm having to adapt a lot of the issues that we're addressing, or the particular approaches or the arguments that are used. Now, the faith doesn't change. And ultimately, the key arguments, they don't always change as well, but the application, the context, the receptivity, a lot of cultural apologetics is concerned with how are people receiving and how can we articulate in such a way that makes the offense of the cross actually clearer to them. Because ultimately, that's the encounter all of us have to have, is with our sin and the cross of Christ. That's bottom line, no matter what you're trying to do in apologetics. But the way people get there can often really change, and especially in a culture that's changing very, very rapidly for a host of reasons.
You know, I used to regularly, when I was a pastor, hold a multi-week skeptics forum where it was kind of like, my daddy's bigger than your daddy. I can't answer your questions, but my pastor will eat your lunch. And they would join, and I got to say, most of the people who came became Christians. But that simply wouldn't work in this cultural context. That's not where the questions are coming from. Do you think, and we're going to run out of time in this segment, but do you think that the best way to do cultural apologetics is to create questions and then answer them when they're asked, maybe to shock, maybe to live in a different way, maybe kindness, maybe lunch, maybe things that would create questions?
I think there's a lot of ways. That's one of the beauties of this book, which is a number of different contributors from our Keller Center for Cultural Apologetics wrote chapters approaching different subjects with different techniques, different strengths. So it's a varied approach. But the thing that all of it shares in common is a broader concern about the way a specific way that things are changed. When Tim Keller and I started this center, he explained it this way. He said, in the past, evangelism was about connecting the dots that people already have. They knew about God, they knew about sin, they knew basically that they needed help, they needed something that was called salvation. But they didn't know how to apply it, they didn't know how to piece it all together. A lot of evangelism and apologetics was just helping them to do that, kind of defeating a few beliefs. The challenge that we're running into now is people don't even know the dots are there. So a lot of what we're doing with cultural apologetics is starting the apologetic and evangelistic conversations earlier as to basic concepts like, who is God? What am I for? Why am I here? Where am I going? Basic questions like that. So you're right, helping people to ask questions of themselves and generating further questions for investigation is definitely part of what we're doing in cultural apologetics.
Oh, man, that's so good. And during this hour, I want to get into your being hopeful about our culture. This book, by the way, is not all written by Collin. There's a great introduction to kind of get you started in the right direction. And then he got a bunch of friends to help him. And it is a wealth of information. You ought to get it. It's called The Gospel After Christendom, an introduction to cultural apologetics. That sounds about as exciting as a bucket of chicken feet. But don't let the title kid you or get you confused. This is an exciting and important book. You ought to get it. You ought to send it to your friends. Hey, thanks for joining us. We're hanging out with Collin Hansen, and his new book he wrote with some friends is titled The Gospel After Christendom, an Introduction to Cultural Apologetics. And if you're a Christian, you're living in a different culture and you need some guidance, this is going to be an incredible and helpful book. In fact, it's one that you ought to, in a small group in your church, you ought to make this the textbook. And it's doable. It sounds like it's a college or graduate school textbook. But the fodder's down low enough that if you work at it, you're going to learn stuff that'll really make a difference. By the way, Collin, we've interviewed a number of people, and they're increasing, who seem to think that we're sitting on top of an awakening. Not just here. We interviewed one guy in Europe that gave us facts and figures about young people who are coming back to the faith. Is that Albert Camus said the only question that thinking people have to face is whether or not they commit suicide. And there is a darkness, a nihilism, an emptiness that is everywhere. Is that what you work with?
Yeah, that's definitely what we try to do with cultural apologetics. I know that some of you are probably familiar with my colleague Michael Graham. He's our program director at the Keller Center, and he's based out of Orlando. And the way he describes this as secularism is unlivable.
Yeah.
It does not work. And why would it work? It ends up in nihilism. You can try escapism. Those are your two options. You got escapism or nihilism. And nihilism is for the people who are just too serious-minded for the escapism, which when you live in a relatively affluent culture, you can medicate yourself for quite a while before you have to confront that. But I think one thing we're seeing with younger people is that the escapism does not answer the real questions they have about what is the purpose of anything? Why would I even get up? Why would I continue? They've got anxiety about a lot of different things. Just think about it this way. Um, an earlier generation, when you're born, your identity is formed primarily from outside influences. It's based on who your family is. It tells you a lot of what you're going to do for your work. It dictates a lot of your religion, where you're going to live, who you're going to marry. A lot of those questions are dictated for you. Still that way in parts of the world today. And as Christians, we might push back on some of that and say, well, that's kind of underscoring some of the freedom that we enjoy in Christ. And you can see some of the problems there. However, consider the alternative. The alternative is that from the earliest ages, you're not even supposed to know which gender you are. You're not sure who you're supposed to be attracted to in terms of, the other sex or some sort of, non-binary or who knows. You don't know where you're supposed to live. You're supposed to have a job, but then also you're supposed to make a lot of money so you can live a comfortable lifestyle, but it also needs to be a just job. It also needs to be a fun job. Also, you can live anywhere that you want. Also, you don't need to you need to make up your own religion because you really can't trust any of the authorities in your life. Put this all together, and we have heaped a massive legalistic burden on younger generations who are, no surprise, completely unable to be able to handle that. So your options are you despair of everything, you try to medicate yourself, or ultimately, and we hope and we see, I think, more young people doing this today. You mentioned Europe. There are a lot of good reports in terms of what we're seeing out of the UK. I heard similar reports. I was just in Denmark doing a conference in Copenhagen. Not huge numbers, but definitely hearing about young people in particular, a difference there. And I think it's pretty clear against those alternatives, Christianity is much more appealing. I mean, it's appealing ultimately because it's true, but consider the alternatives.
Oh, Matthew?
Yeah. Collin, when you say cultural apologetics, my brain goes to Paul speaking. He acknowledges the bad narratives that are kind of blindly reaching out and kind of bridges that gap in a really organic, motivated kind of way. Is that kind of a model of what we're talking about? And where do you see these kinds of conversations happening in the modern age?
Yeah, so definitely Acts 17, the Mars Hill, the Paul at the Areopagus, that's definitely paradigmatic for us. And when you consider Paul, even just in that own chapter, Paul is sharing the same gospel to different audiences with different backgrounds and different expectations. It's the same message, but it is contextualized quite differently. So in cultural apologetics, we are trying to be more mindful of the particular questions that arise in one place and time, and not trying to answer questions that people are just not asking. That's part of the basic concern. Now, where are these conversations happening today? There's a chapter in this book by James Eglinton. James is a professor at the University of Edinburgh. Wonderful, wonderful person. He picked up an idea that actually Tim Keller had first explored with him, and it's called just basically front porch apologetics. One of the things we've noticed, and this goes all the way back to some things that Abraham Kuyper had taught 100 plus years ago about the secularizing Europe. Essentially, the problem that we see often now is that we have the things that we're saying and doing inside the church, but the church walls are really imposing to a lot of people. That step to come inside the church when you have very little contact with Christianity is very difficult for people. Then there's a whole world outside, and we're not necessarily confident in a constantly changing culture how we're supposed to reach those people. What we need are physical and metaphorical front porches. The front porch is not inside the house, it's not the church, but it's not the street. It's a place that's in between. We need more physical and metaphorical places where people can come together and simply explore these ideas, because apologetically, people are going to have a lot of questions that there needs to be some place where they can answer them. They can ask and have them answered safely among people that they've come to know and to trust. It's just rare that people are going to automatically investigate these things on their own and then magically, God does that all the time and we give thanks for that. It's just not the most common way that we see it today. So we need more of those front porches. Go ahead, Matthew.
Yeah, and so just to double back to something you said, I think when you talk about apologetics, we think, okay, I got to have the answers and everything. But what I'm hearing you say is, yes, emphasize that. Also, it's going to take some investment on the front end of developing relationships and trust where somebody's going to care enough about you to have those kinds of conversations. It's not going to be a drive-by experience in all likelihood.
Yeah, you see this in the Apostle Paul. You also see this just practically. People will tend to want to belong to a community, and then they will develop their beliefs to be able to match the community that they desire to be a part of. That's just being a human being. You see that in the book of Romans, both negatively and positive. We see people leaving the faith because of what they experience in the Christian community. Well, the reverse is true. In that nihilistic age, the Christian community, and where secularism is unlivable, Christian community becomes a lot more compelling, and it becomes unique. There are not very many other places where you can do these things in our culture today.
Good stuff. We're going to talk more about it when we get back. If going and sitting on the front porch with pagans scares the spit out of you, stay with us. You're going to be surprised, maybe even pleased. Hey, thanks for hanging out with us. We're hanging out with Collin Hansen. And by the way, you can keep up with him on X at Collin Hansen. That's COLLINHANSEN.
Collin, kind of, and let me see if I can make this transition and as part of the question, but we were talking about the front porch approach, and part of that is establishing relationships. And certainly a big part of establishing the relationship is genuinely caring about the person, finding out where their struggles are, being a good friend. But another opportunity that would seem to come up is what their interests are, what their understanding of life is, and so forth, where you might connect with some of the stories that they are aware of, kind of transitioning to that classic transcendentals of the good, truth, and beauty through story. Can you, have I strung too many things there together?
No, I think people can, going back to Steve's first question, I think a lot of people are rightly intimidated about apologetics. I mean, the number of possible objections to the faith are seemingly infinite, and how can anybody be an expert in that? But we wrote this book very differently. We wanted to say that apologetics is not just for the people who enjoy arguing, it's for the whole church. It's for everybody. And one of the ways that you can simply do that is by asking other people their story. If you've been a Christian for a long time and you've spent a lot of time in the church, you may just take it for granted that people care about you. You may take it for granted that people want to know your story, that you've been able to share, that you get to talk about what you're actually feeling, how you're experiencing this world, and people will show up to help you. It's not how most people live. Most people do not have that opportunity. Most people do not have somebody who takes an interest in them and to simply ask, who are you? So, I mean, I've heard people, talk about just tattoos. If somebody has a tattoo, there's a story behind that tattoo. It's one of the easiest ways to be able to approach somebody, to be able to hear, okay, what are your hopes? What are your dreams? What are your fears? What pain have you experienced, and how have you dealt with that? How have you overcome that, or how do you continue to cope with that? Those are questions that most people are not going to just brush you off and say that they're not interested in that. Most people are going to be shocked that anybody would care about that. So I think when it comes to this kind of cultural apologetics, all of us can be a good neighbor. All of us can go out of our way to take an interest in other people, to love them in tangible ways, to ask them questions, to take an interest. That's certainly what I hope this book will help to inspire more of.
Collin, I'm sure the answer to this will be fairly quick, but would you tell us, I think our audience will be interested. Would you tell us, in the introduction, you talk about weather versus climate. Would you explain that
Yeah.
a little bit?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that one. Yeah. So this was a life-shaping moment for me going back to 2016. I was very interested. My background's journalism, so I was very interested in news. And I was talking to a professor named James Davison Hunter at the University of Virginia. He's an eminent sociologist. And I said, and what's going on? There's a lot of crazy things that are happening politically in the year 2016, of course, a really big deal. And I said, can you help me make sense of what this means? And he just sort of brushed me off, pushed me away, and he said, you're treating me like I'm reporting the weather. I'm a climatologist. And I stopped and I thought, okay, so he's saying you're talking about what's going to happen yesterday, what happened yesterday, what's going to happen tomorrow. I'm thinking what's happened over the course of 30 years, 50 years, 100 years, those kinds of things. I don't think many of us are trained to think about culture at deeper levels. I don't think a lot of us are trained in that kind of cultural climatology. There's some really good stuff out there. Tim Keller was very good at that, but he was rare. But we've really built the center out of inspiration for that kind of effort, which is ongoing. And so we're also hoping with this book that more of us will turn our attention toward cultural climatology, the kinds of things in a culture that nobody talks about because they're all assumed. Those are the most powerful things that are shaping your world because you don't even have to talk about them, but you immediately know. You jump to another country, you jump to another context, you immediately see those things and you bring them up and people don't even notice them. Well, that happens to us too in our own context.
Oh man, that's good stuff. If and most of us are pretty intimidated by unbelief. We have this feeling that they know more than we do, that they are more articulate than we are, and it's a lie. It's just not true. They're just like you. And because they are, that means that human beings can relate to human beings. And this book will make you feel confident in doing it. And then, once you do it and you're successful at it, remember where you heard this interview. And then send a generous contribution. I'm sorry. But, George pushes me to say these things, and I don't want to say them.
Yeah.
Hey, the book is The Gospel After Christendom. It is a great book and an important book for your church because this has to do, as Collin says, not just with experts, but with the whole church. And so if you have a concern for your culture and your neighbors and your friends, but you don't know what to do about it, the first thing to do is to buy this book. Hey, don't go anywhere. Like Jesus, we're coming back. Hey, thanks for spending this time with us. By the way, our free weekly email, the Key Life Connection, just won the prestigious Inboxy Award. Okay, all right, I made it up. But it is free, and as always, it's not half bad, so try today. As soon as the program is over, go to keylife.org/subscribe.
Collin, it seems like a lot of these cultural apologetics conversations can stem from concerns that what's on people's minds and what's weighing on their hearts. One of my pet interests is slang. I'm fascinated by it, and the newer it is, the more I'm into it. And I realize I'm in touch with that. I am not in touch with what the issues are that are important to young people. And I just recently, in the last 2 weeks, came across a land, what do you call it? Land attribution. I'm like, I've heard about this.
Oh, right.
Seems adorable to me, but this really matters to you. It's completely foreign to me. But
as silly as maybe some of those things are, it's not it's a possible entry point to a conversation. Do you have any
Yeah.
sense of these days for people who are in their 30s or 20s, what's kind of the top of mind issues for them?
Yeah, I'm going to give you a climatology answer as opposed to a weather forecast answer there because
Yeah.
I'm the wrong age in terms of my kids are too young and I'm too old. So I don't really know
That's a
lot of
horrible
those
place
things.
to be.
Yeah, that's right. So let's just talk overall climatology here for a second. Let's talk about in the last generation, one of the major challenges that I don't think a lot of young people could articulate, but they have had to deal with in ways that we might be able to help expose and help solve. They've been told that they can do whatever they want as long as they don't hurt another person. In other words, a kind of moral relativism. Nobody can tell you, it's judgmental to tell somebody that they're wrong, that they're doing the wrong thing. At the same time, they've been told that justice is really important. And in fact, the internet has really heightened that dynamic. It's made us much more justice conscious because we can now see all these people doing bad things and it makes us really upset. We want it to stop. So that land acknowledgement statement would be a good example of what I'm talking about there. Okay, so we simultaneously think do whatever you want as long as it doesn't hurt anybody. Also, justice is super really important. Yeah, those things obviously they don't go together at all. They don't fit. And you have multiple problems of, well, what is the point of this freedom? And we go back to the secularism is unlivable comment back there. Unlimited freedom lends to either medicating yourself to death or to nihilism. And then, medicate yourself to death or unto death, either way. And on the other hand, this justice pursuit just makes you a scold or worse. It just consumes you because you cannot stop it. Plus, you have no basis for how to say that something is wrong or not unless you have some transcendent authority. So otherwise, just your personal preference, and then everything collapses into simple power. Okay, well, now we're back to Nietzsche. We're back to nihilism again. So the climatology answer would be young people are facing that same problem that's especially hit them in the last generation, which is how are they supposed to say, whatever you want to do is fine, and nobody can tell you, including informing their own identity, nobody can tell you what to do. And simultaneously, you have to do all the right things or you're going to get canceled.
Yeah.
Oof.
And
I'm not
who
a good
defines
combo.
the right things?
At least have a shot at cognitive dissonance on that one. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, and that cognitive dissonance is the way to say, well, wait a minute. You were made for freedom. For freedom, Christ has set you free. But what's it for? Ultimately, it's for worship. And then simultaneously, there is a standard for justice, a standard that none of us can hold up under except through the cross of Christ. And then let's talk about that transcendent standard and what it provides for us in a stable society. Not to mention how at the cross, Romans 3:23-26, the forgiveness and justice both meet in the person and the sacrifice of Christ. So, yeah, there's a real opportunity there. But you got to dig down a little bit deeper into some of that climatology.
That's good.
Collin, I just wanted to point out last week, for some reason, I don't even know where I saw it, but there was I saw a clip, a Charlie Kirk clip, and he was saying he was not talking to kids, but he was saying exactly what you said, and in essence, he was talking about the utter chaotic confusion that's redundant. I realize that young people are facing today. They have no idea where to go and where to turn, and of course, he's saying, here's the answer over here, which is exactly what you said, Jesus. And he named off some of exactly the same things that you said. They're trying everything, and nothing is working. Absolutely nothing is working. And they're basically saying, just tell me what to do. Just give me a place where I can land, or, point me in the right direction. And that's exactly, that's what you're saying.
Yeah, that's right. And I think if you look and see, going back to some of the earlier conversations about what are we seeing with young people today, going back at least the last 5 longer years, you see a lot of interest in Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson doesn't land in a Christian place, so he's not an apologist in that sense. But it's very similar to what you're describing right there, Kathy, of the confusion of people. Like, I actually need authority. You need a good authority to be able to thrive.
Yep.
Society without that authority is abysmal, to put it kindly. And then simultaneously, I need encouragement. I need some tangible answers. I need some assistance here. The burden of developing my own identity without any external influence is impossible. It is unbearable. And so you'll see voices like that, and some of them are better than others, and some of them will go all the way to Christianity, like you mentioned with Kirk, and then some of them will stop short of it in some kind of a psychological sense, the way that Jordan Peterson does. But they're tapping into the same basic problems that we've been describing here, whether the culture has shifted in deep ways, not just the superficial ways, but the really deep ways, in the way the church has a significant opportunity. Yes, this is very scary. Yes, it's a threat. Yes, we've seen decline in the church, but also the further we get away from the historical, cultural Christianity of Christendom, the more opportunity we have in some ways to be able to answer questions of people who don't know where to turn and don't have the same baggage against Christianity that previous generations did. So there's opportunities wherever you look. We're hoping to capitalize on some of them and encourage others in the church to do likewise. And so far, we've seen a positive response. And every difficulty we see in apologetics can be flipped around into an opportunity to expose the resolution that comes through the cross.
Collin, we're out of time, and I don't know where it went. It just flew by. But you guys have done a really good thing. This is an important book, and it's something about which we need to think. The title of it is The Gospel After Christendom, an introduction to cultural apologetics, with a subtitle, Tattoo Evangelism. If you'd let me write your title, you'd sell more books.
Second edition, Steve. Second edition.
God bless you, man. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, guys.
Really like this time with Collin, because it stirs in me something that hasn't already been there. A number of years ago, I was speaking at a fairly large, in fact, a very large church in Atlanta. I was on the teaching and preaching staff, and I announced there are millions of people going to hell, and I don't care. I don't know their names. I don't know their children's names. I don't want to know them. And boy, you could have heard pin drop in that auditorium. And then, and I said, and I'm not bragging, I'm confessing. And I'm asking you to pray for me that God gives me a heart that cares about the people that I meet casually in a mall or a bar or a restaurant. And I think those people began to pray seriously. I really do. And something started happening to me. I care about the lady with the tattoo. I really do. And I don't know where that came from, except maybe Jesus. I mean, I really care about the kids who are lost and don't know where to go. I just don't know what to do about it. I'm like a mosquito in a nudist colony. I know what to do. I just don't know where to begin. And I care. I really do. And that's why a book like this is important to me personally. And it ought to be important to every Christian. I mean, we're here for them. I mean, it's been settled for us. We're forgiven. We're free. We're on our way to heaven, period. And that's never going to change. It's there forever. And so what are we still around for? Let's get this thing over with and get to the cake. The reason we're still here is because of them. And this book is a good book to remind us of that, to remind us that sometimes we're the only source of a message of hope and meaning and love and connection. So get the book and check it out. Who's going to be on next week?
Next week, a stellar group of humans will be here. Us.
Oh.
It is our Thanksgiving program next week.
Okay. You going to fix food?
Absolutely.
Oh, well. I wish we had some way to let people.
You gonna make me a pecan pie?
It all depends on how well you behave between now and then.
Oh, very, very well.
You'll have to work out
We'll see.
Have to work out the smell-o-vision though.
Oh, that,
Yeah, there you go.
Yes.
Okay. It's going to be a great program despite the guest next week. And it's our fond hope that you join us. Between now and then, don't do anything we wouldn't. That gives you a wide
Birth.
berth.
No, they've already been born.